There is a worm buried beneath you right now, or at least beneath anyone standing near a tropical reef. You can't see it. You probably wouldn't even know it was there, but it knows you're there. And if you were the right size, you'd be gone before your brain finished processing what happened. This video is about the bobbit worm, and I want to be upfront about something. When I first came across this animal, I assumed it was one of those scary ocean creature things that sounds dramatic online, but is actually pretty boring in reality. A big worm. Sure, whatever. But the more I dug into what this thing actually does, the more I realized it's genuinely one of the most unsettling predators on the planet. Not because it's huge, not because it's venomous, but because of how it hunts and how long it went completely unnoticed by the scientific community. We're going to go through what makes this animal so effective, cover some facts that even most marine biology enthusiasts haven't heard, and end on a story about a worm named Barry that I genuinely think about more than I should. Let's start with the thing that most people skip over because they jump straight to the strike speed. The bobbit worm is almost completely blind. It has 5 sensory antennae that stick up above the sand while the rest of its body is buried underground, and those antennae are doing all the work. They're picking up chemical traces in the water, pressure changes, vibrations from movement, so when a fish swims by, the worm isn't seeing it. It's feeling it, detecting the ripple of something moving through the water column above the sand. And it's doing this with a level of sensitivity that lets it time a strike in the dark at depth with no warning and almost no margin for error. That's important on its own, but here's where it gets genuinely strange. Because the worm is blind and buried, it has no way to track prey the way a visual predator does. It can't follow a fish, can't adjust mid-chase, can't course correct. So instead of chasing anything, it just waits. It buries itself so completely that only those 5 antennae are visible above the sediment. And then it holds completely still for hours, sometimes for days, just sitting there in the dark, feeling the water. There's something deeply unsettling about that kind of patience. Most predators we think of as scary are fast and aggressive sharks, crocodiles, big cats. The bobbit worm is none of those things. It's still. And stillness, when it comes from something that can kill you, is somehow much worse. When it finally does move, it moves faster than your nervous system can process. The strike happens in under 25 milliseconds. That's not a typo. 25 milliseconds. The average human blink takes around 150 milliseconds. So by the time your eye would have even started to close, the worm has already lunged, grabbed, and begun retreating underground. The force behind that lunge is so concentrated that it can bisect a fish clean in half, not injure it, not stun it, cut it in 2, and then pull whatever it caught back underground before the water around it has had time to settle. Divers have filmed this on camera, and you still can barely see it happen. It's less like watching a predator hunt and more like watching something disappear. Now here's what makes the strike even more effective, and this part is still being studied, so there's some uncertainty around it. But scientists suspect the bobbit worm's bite delivers some kind of chemical or mechanical shock to its prey, a toxin, or something functionally similar to one. Because prey animals aren't just getting cut, they're getting incapacitated. Fish that should be able to thrash and escape even after being grabbed just don't. They go limp. Some prey has been observed vanishing so completely and so fast that researchers watching on camera couldn't determine what happened even after reviewing the footage. The worm grabs, something shuts down in the prey, and then it's gone. Underground, over. If that's not the most efficient kill mechanism in the ocean, I don't know what is. But here's the thing about the bobbit worm that I think deserves more attention than the strike the size. Because the strike is shocking, but the size is what makes the size of the strike make sense. Most bobbit worms you'll read about are described as being around 3 to 4 feet long. That's already a lot for a worm, but documented specimens have exceeded 10 feet. 10 feet long, buried under the sand. And because they live almost entirely underground and grow continuously throughout their lives, which can exceed 25 years, no one actually knows how large the biggest ones get. There could be worms down there that have been growing in the same patch of seafloor for 2 decades that we've never seen, never cataloged, never measured. The true upper limit of their size is genuinely unknown, and the older they get, the deeper their burrows go. Some burrows have been measured at 6 feet deep into the sediment. You try to pull one out, and it anchors itself so powerfully that the force required to extract it can physically tear the worm apart. And even then, it can survive. So you have an animal that's potentially 10 feet long, has been alive for over 2 decades, is buried 6 feet underground, strikes faster than you can blink, and may be injecting a paralytic toxin into its prey. And it lives in shallow tropical reefs, places where people snorkel. That's worth sitting with for a second. If you're finding this as wild as I did, drop a comment below. I want to know if you'd still go snorkeling after watching this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the kind of content we do here regularly, so it's worth hitting that button now before the algorithm buries us somewhere you'll never find us, which, given the topic, feels appropriate. Now I want to talk about the jaws, because the jaws deserve their own moment. The bobbit worm's mandibles are described as scissor-like, and that's not really doing them justice. They're hardened, serrated, and powerful enough that fishermen who've accidentally pulled one up have lost fingers. Not been nipped, lost fingers. But the most disturbing detail about the jaws isn't what they do to prey. It's what they sometimes do to the worm itself. The mandibles are so forceful and so difficult to control that bobbit worms have been observed injuring themselves with their own bite. The mechanism that makes them so lethal is so extreme that the worm occasionally can't stop it in time to avoid cutting itself. That's how much force is involved. It's a weapon that barely respects its own owner. And then there's the appearance, which is where the bobbit worm gets genuinely surreal, because despite everything I've just described, this animal is iridescent. Its scales shimmer with rainbow colors, purples, greens, golds, which is why it was placed in the genus Eunice, named after a sea goddess. You have this ancient blind ambush predator that lives in darkness under the sand, that can slice a fish in half in a quarter of a blink, and it looks like it was designed by someone who was also making carnival decorations. It's one of those details that makes you realize nature really does not care about your expectations. Now, Barry, in 2009, staff at the Blue Reef Aquarium in Newquay, UK, started noticing something wrong with one of their display tanks. Fish were disappearing overnight, not dying, disappearing. No bodies, no visible cause, no explanation. Then corals started getting damaged, chunks of it torn up from the bottom of the tank. Staff set traps. The traps came back empty or broken. They added cameras. Whatever was doing this was either avoiding the cameras or moving too fast to catch clearly. This went on for months. The tank had been set up with live rock, real rock from the ocean, brought in to make the environment more natural, and somewhere inside that rock, hitchhiking in completely undetected, was a bobbit worm. It had been in the tank the whole time, growing, eating, waiting. Eventually, the staff had no choice. They dismantled the entire tank, piece by piece, rock by rock, until they found it. A 4-foot bobbit worm buried in the substrate of a public aquarium that had been living there for an unknown amount of time before anyone realized it existed. They named it Barry. Barry was removed from the tank, and then, because this story couldn't end normally, Barry was reportedly given away to a private collector. There's no public record of where Barry went. No one knows where Barry is now. A 4-foot bobbit worm somewhere in someone's private collection that may have been growing for years since then. I'm not saying that's terrifying. I'm just saying I think about it sometimes. The Barry story is funny on the surface, but it actually actually reveals something important about this animal, which is that we genuinely don't understand how widespread or how large they are in the wild. If a bobbit worm can live undetected in a professionally managed public aquarium for months in a controlled environment with trained staff, with regular observation what's living undetected on actual reefs, the worm hitchhiked in on a piece of live rock, which is a common material used in marine tanks all over the world, which means Barry almost certainly wasn't the only one. There are probably bobbit worms in aquariums right now that nobody knows about yet, waiting, feeling the vibrations of fish swimming overhead, completely still. One more thing that I think gets overlooked because the hunting behavior is so dramatic, the bobbit worm's reproduction is almost entirely a mystery. They're hermaphroditic, meaning they produce both eggs and sperm. They release both into the water column in what's called broadcast spawning, but almost no one has ever actually witnessed this happen. For an animal that lives in shallow tropical reefs all over the world, in places where divers and researchers spend enormous amounts of time, we have almost no direct observations of how they reproduce. They're that good at staying hidden. We know they're there because we find their burrows, or because something goes missing in a tank, or because a diver gets lucky with a camera at exactly the right moment. But the actual life of a bobbit worm, how it mates, how its young disperse, how it establishes a new burrow, is still largely a blank. And that's maybe the most unsettling part of all of this. The bobbit worm isn't some deep-sea creature living miles below the surface in a place humans never go. It lives in shallow water, in reefs, in places we've been swimming and diving for decades, and we still barely understand it. We're still finding them in places they shouldn't be, still discovering new details about how they hunt, still unable to say with confidence how big the biggest ones get. It's one of those animals that makes you realize how much of the ocean floor is still genuinely unknown territory. So here's where we land. The bobbit worm is blind, patient, and buried. It strikes faster than the eye can follow and can cut prey clean in half. It may inject a toxin that shuts prey down before they can react. It can live for over 25 years and grow to at least 10 feet, possibly longer, in a burrow 6 feet underground. Its jaws are so powerful, they occasionally injure the worm itself. It's iridescent. It's hermaphroditic. It infested a public aquarium for months without anyone noticing, and somewhere out there, Barry is still growing. When I started researching this video, I thought the bobbit worm was going to be a cool, slightly scary ocean creature. What I found was an animal that's been quietly redefining what an ambush predator can be for millions of years in plain sight, completely unnoticed. The ocean floor isn't empty, it's full of things waiting, and the bobbit worm is proof that the most terrifying predators aren't always the ones you can see coming. If this video got into your head a little, I'd genuinely love to know in the comments what's the detail that got you the most: the strike speed, the jaws, the size, or Barry. And if you want to keep going down this rabbit hole, there's a video right over here about another ocean predator that breaks the rules of how we think hunting works. It's worth your time. I'll see you there.